Today we'll be blending, but not fruit or smoothies. We'll be blending sizes on our sewing patterns so we can get the best fit. It'll be very practical, hands-on. Stay tuned. Hi sewing friends, I'm Karina from liftingpinsandneedles.com. Welcome to this channel that is all about sewing, limitless sewing, and in this case, fitting. We are fitting our best woven tops in this mini series that has been going on the channel. I hope so far it has been helpful. I know it's impossible to touch on every single topic in every single video. I am dividing them into areas. I know a lot of you give me comments and trying to get ahead of yourselves. When are you going to talk about this? When are you going to talk about that? And don't worry, it'll all come, but it'll come in a certain order that I've planned. And I'm going to cover most topics. I just cannot cover every single scenario there is out there, but I'm doing my best to cover as much as I can. And please watch the whole series. I will leave the playlist link down below. I've already got several episodes up on the channel already. In the latest episode, we talked about how to choose your size. I gave you a few tips, a bit of motivation. Always try to choose a pattern that will match your sewing cup size the closest. It will just make the process so much easier. So if you are a double D cup and you really want to sew a big 4 pattern that is drafted for a B cup, okay, but you'll have a harder time doing that than if you go and look around and find a pattern drafted for a D cup. That's just an example. If you find a sewing cup size on a pattern that is close to yours, it will be much easier to fit the bust and the shoulders, and you can choose the same size from your bust and the shoulders on the pattern. All the patterns I've recommended to you for this series are very simple patterns. They have sleeves that are set in, that reach the shoulder joint. You know, they're not drop shoulders, they're not dolman styles. They are the type of patterns that will really help you understand fit. They're not tight fitting garments, and all of these patterns have either individual cup sizes or either have a B cup size draft or a D cup size draft. Some of them have a B, C, D. So there are options there. Look around and find what's closest to you, because I will not be talking about full bust adjustments in this specific video. That one will come later. In this one, we are blending sizes from the bust, the waist, and the hips in all different scenarios. Here we have a smaller pattern piece. It is not real size, but it will show us easily how to blend sizes here on the side seam. You have already analyzed your body measurements, plotted them on the size chart, compared the finished garment measurements, and you've decided what you would like for the bust, the waist, and the hips on a pattern. I have printed out 3 sizes here. You can see the 3 lines there. We are going to go over a few scenarios. The first thing is, if you need to blend from a bust to a different size waist, you need to close this bust dart. If your blending will start at the waist and below, then you don't need to worry about closing this bust dart. Okay, so what happens if you have a bust size and the waist size falls into a larger size? You might want to blend out for that. You might not want to or need to, depending on the pattern. All these styles have a pretty loose waist. You'll find anywhere from 9, 10, 11, 12 inches of ease at the waist. So you might not need to blend to a larger size at the waist, but you might want to. It's all up to you. I'm just putting all the scenarios out there, and we are going to see next how to blend from a bust size to a larger waist size, and then what to do with the hips. Let's see. You will need to do something with that bust dart before you blend your sizes. It won't be just drawing the line straight through, because you need that bust dart closed in order for you to blend properly between the bust and the waist. Bust dart closed first. What can help you close it is drawing a line through the middle of the dart. So you find the tip of the dart, you can see the middle is right there, and just draw a line across. That is going to help you fold it. Paper does not behave like fabric, but we can still meet the dart legs there, fold it along that center line that we just drew, and close it up. You can see the paper takes the shape now where the bust would have the space. That's what the dart creates. Let's just look at this. For example, the smaller size that we can see here, and blend to a larger waist. On this top fitting series, all of these patterns have a lot of positive ease at the waist. If you're concerned and you still want to use a larger size on the waist, you can use a ruler that has a curve and find the armhole right there, and then try to find a nice curve that will unite this to the next
size at the waist here. So this is not an exact thing, just try to make the line as smooth as you can. You can see that I've gone from this size to the next size at the waist right there. And that involves the dart. You need to have the dart closed so that when you trim this away, your dart will be true to the new size that you have here. I would suggest you use the same waist size as the hips to keep the proportion. So you would keep going here on this line right there. If you're concerned and you wanted to blend back into a smaller hip size, I think you couldn't do that smoothly more than one size, or else this is going to end up dipping in like this and it's just not going to hang right on the side seam. You can use rulers, but sometimes freehand is nicer. Let's try to bring this back into the other size. And you could get away with it because the line here is still pretty straight. Imagine you wanted to blend in a lot and it would just dip in like this, then it wouldn't work. I would suggest you stay close to the waist size for the hips and maybe blend in one size, making sure that the new line is at least straight down and not coming in. If I go ahead and cut the new side seam now. Now before you open up your dart, you need to take your back pattern piece and make sure that you blend in the same way. So this is the back here. I'm going to place this right there, align that first size I used for the bust. Remember, this is going to have the same length here because the dart is closed. And then I would go ahead and draw exactly that on the back right there. So I'll show you how to do this with this example. This is the back. So you want the side seams to have the same shape and the same curve if possible. You created your smooth lines on the front and this is the back. When you place the back next to your front, after your dart is sewn, it will have the same shape and size, the same curve, the same everything that you achieved on the front needs to be mimicked on the back. On this one you can clearly see how you start on one size and then you can see the curve at the waist blending out and then back in. But on the side, it still looks like it's going to make sense. This line at the hip isn't coming in like this. It's not flaring out because you need a smaller hip. So this is just one example.
So you see that to do a smooth line from the bust to the waist, to go from one size to the next, you need that bust dart closed. Do your best to close it as best as you can. Paper does not behave like fabric. It's quite stiff. Put some tape there. Make sure it's really well closed. Cut on the side. When you cut it and open up your dart, it will be true to your new side seam that blends from one size to the next. So that is how you would deal with that. You saw that sometimes when you go to a larger waist, and you might want to keep that same size for the hips, depending on the style, if it's a little flared out or if it curves down, you might want to think about whether you want to blend back into a smaller hip size if that is your case, or just continue down. I would not want to blend from the waist to a smaller hip more than one size. It will end up being pretty straight, but you definitely don't want it to dip in. You don't want your waist coming out and then your hips coming in a slant. The garment will just not hang correctly. Now I've shown you there how to deal with the back. I'm just showing you that in this opportunity, you know how to do that with all the other scenarios coming in. Might be a very common one, and it's when your bust falls into the same size as your waist, but then your hips will fall into the next size or the next size. So for example, if you had an 18 bust and an 18 waist, but then you needed a 22 hip, that is the scenario we're talking about.
This is another scenario, and in this one we won't close this bust dart because the only place in the body that needs another size is the hips. You would probably start from the waist notch right there, and you need to blend out to a larger size at the hips. You can see it's nice and curved on this pattern. On others it might flare out a little bit, so it just depends on the shape of the pattern. If you want to use a curved ruler or a straight ruler, put this there on the waist notch of the size I'm doing for the bust, so it will be the same bust size here. And just from the waist to the hips, I want to go one size more. So this is the size I want for the hips, which is one size more. And I'll just place my ruler there, meeting it there, meeting it here, and just do a nice gentle curve right there. You can see it goes from that size to the next size very gently through the lines. And at the full hip, which is around here, I have the size that I need for the space that I need. Now, if I wanted to blend two more sizes, it would be the same. The curve would just be a little more pronounced. I would start right there at the waist notch and just take the curved ruler to another size. And then just make that curve there. You can see that coming out like that. Doesn't involve the bust dart at all, so I don't need to touch it or fold it or anything. I'm not changing anything there because I'm keeping the bust and the waist size the same. The only thing I needed to adjust was this right there. You can always freehand it as well. Sometimes freehand, for me at least, works really nicely. I don't doubt myself as I doubt myself when I'm using a ruler. Again, you would take your back piece after you've cut out your new line and you would align the back to make sure that everything matches the same. You know, you've printed your front and your back with all the sizes that you need.
Now the other scenario we are going to show also involves that dart. You also need to close it, and it's when you have a bust size and you want to go to a smaller waist size and then maybe back out to a larger hip. Could happen for a lot of people, so let's see.
Okay, let's do another scenario where the bust dart will be involved. What if I wanted to have a size 16 bust, which is the middle line there, but then I wanted to go to a 14 waist and then to an 18 hip? The curves on some people are much more pronounced like that, and maybe you want to do that type of blend to get a better fit, to not end up with a waist that's super boxy. You're never going to end up with a fitted waist on a style like this. So let's close this dart. Okay, there we have a nicely closed dart. Take some type of curved ruler, play around with the curves, the shapes, until you get something that makes sense, that looks smooth. So this looks smooth to me. So I'm going to go from that bust size to a smaller waist size, just one size, right there. And then from that waist size, I want to go to a larger hip size. I'll put my ruler there, meet the edge here at the bottom at the size I want. I'm going 2 sizes up at the hips. You can see the pink line would match this person that had a 16 bust, 1 size smaller at the waist, and then from the waist 2 size difference. And you can see that this shape here on the side will match the bust circumference, the waist, and the hips better for that person if she hadn't blended sizes. If she decided to choose one straight size based on the largest size, which is the hips, and she made a straight 18, she would end up with a very, very boxy waist and a very loose bust as well. So it's always better to blend your sizes.
This is an adjustment that you might need for your body if you have quite a pronounced waist to hip ratio. You could have measurements that require you to do this adjustment to go from a bust size to a smaller waist and then back out to another hip size. And this is actually what I would need to do in the Montrose top from Cashmerette, that I wanted to go from a 16 bust to a 14 waist back out to a 16 hip. That would give me and my shape a better fit. You can customize and just have your curved ruler. If you think you can't find a shape that makes sense on your curved ruler, just do it freehand. I love freehand. It just depends how confident you are with drawing freehand, whether you're going to like that or not. In my case, I feel way more confident drawing curves freehand than I am with a ruler. When I use a ruler, I put it in a billion positions until I'm happy with the shape that I'm getting. So it's up to you. You might feel much better with a ruler. Do what works best for you and what makes you feel more confident. As you can see, for most of my size choices, I need to blend to a larger hip size. You know, I don't just sew a straight size usually, so you'll see me blending out to the hips quite a lot. So I have chosen a pattern, just any pattern that I'm working on, it doesn't really matter which one. And I've chosen to make the straight size that will correspond to my hip circumference, meaning that my bust and my waist really fell into the size below it. But this is what would happen to you in the shops. If you went shopping and you tried on blouses at the shops and you had a larger hip, you would end up choosing a blouse that fits your hip so that you could get it over your hips. And then you'd end up with baggy, loose fitting, wider shoulders falling off further away from your joint, vertical type of folds. And I'll show you what that looks like on with an example in my lovely purple muslins that I've been making. You can see a top that I've made just using my hip measurement just to make a straight size. So you can see what something that's just big looks like on. So you can see that I have a nice amount of ease at the hips. It's okay, like for the hips, I think it's okay for what it's intended to be. But you can see that there's so much room here. And look, when you see drag lines that are vertical and like folds, look at this. If you can see them just falling like this, that just means it's excess ease basically, and it's coming from here. I have too much space at the bust, it's too much. And on the side you can see my bust start placement is correct at the height because I've already adjusted for that, and I've adjusted for my length, but just the circumferences are off here. If you can see here, this one that doesn't have a sleeve, it's hanging off my shoulder joint. If I put my finger there and lift, it's about 1/2 inch too wide. And you can see where the sleeve is, it's hanging off. It's just not where it's supposed to be. Would be better there. It's minor, it's only 1/2 inch, but it could be so much better if I'd done the size that corresponds for my upper body here, and then just blend it out on the sides to get the fit that I want on the hips. This is just an example for you to see what would happen if you just wanted to sew a straight size, choosing the largest measurement that you see there. In this case, it would be my hips. But just look at this. Look at these vertical folds like this. Just means it's too big. You can see that that garment would have fit me so much better if I had just sewn a smaller size at the bust and the waist and then blended out to fit my hips. On that muslin, that does fit my hips fine. I would be fine wearing that amount of ease at the hips, but it was definitely too large up here on the top. This is another top that I've sewn that fits my shoulders and my bust, my waist correctly. But then I sewed a straight size basically based on my bust. Some of the examples of patterns I showed you demonstrated that if I sewed a straight size that would fit my shoulders and bust, I would end up with maybe 2 inches of positive ease at the hips. It's just not enough. Consider that in this area you're wearing something, you're either wearing pants or a skirt, and when you have a garment on top of you, plus your underwear, that already adds extra circumference to your body. If it was on its own, it's different up here. We're usually not layering things underneath these tops. We just have our skin and our bra, so we can get away with less positive ease on these areas. But at the hips you do need, and look, it's just tight at the hips, it's just fitted, it's not a nice look. And look at these drag lines that come from here, from having this excess to tight hips here. These drag lines are not about the bust shaping in this case, it's just about fitted hips. Sometimes when you have fitted hips, they tend to ride up to a smaller place and you end up with excess here, and then you think it's way back, but it's actually just the full hips not fitting properly. So much better if I just make the size that fits here and then blend out to the hip so I can get a better fit. So not a good idea to sew a straight size if the body measurements just don't match that size for the pattern. So please blend your sizes if you need to. If your body circumferences are spanning different sizes on a pattern, you are perfectly able to blend the sizes to get the circumferences that you need for your body. It's perfectly doable. Just take your time. Maybe it might seem a little scary the first time you do it if you're just used to sticking to one straight size, but you'll see that your fit will improve greatly. You don't need to sew a straight size. You're not buying garments where you have no option, no choice. You are making your garments where you have the luxury of time to be able to customize. So I hope this was practical and helpful for you to see. I hope you try this with your next pattern that you're wanting to make, where you know that your body is not going to be a straight size. You can have a lot of fun customizing to get the circumferences right. After you do this, go ahead and watch my customizing for your height, because you can also customize the lengths on your body as well as customizing for your circumferences. And this will get you much, much closer to that woven top that is going to fit amazing, that you're going to be proud of. Another thing, these videos take me a long time to make. I'm a one-person team. I do everything. And yeah, it's just a lot of work. So please don't expect these videos to come up every day or very close together, because the production time for them is really time intensive on my part. And I'm also combining other type of content on the channel as well to keep it varied. So I'm not dedicating a fixed period of time for this series where every single video you will see coming up is going to be about fitting. But I'm aiming to have one every week, every 10 days or so. So I just wanted to put that out there because I have had comments and emails asking me when's the next one coming, and I really don't want to rush this because I want to bring you quality and something that's going to be super helpful. I don't want to just sit down and film whatever. I do go through an extensive planning process to bring you the best content I can, so I do hope you understand that. Thank you so much for being here today. I will see you soon. Bye.